I'm DC, rated 2200. Endgames win games, but most players mess up. Today, I'll be telling you 5 strategies to dominate every endgame you play in. I'm really excited. Let's begin. Strategy number 1: activate the king. Now, this sounds very confusing, right? So, let me demonstrate with an example. You might think that this position is drawn, and you are absolutely correct. Both sides have 6 pawns each and rooks. But Rook c1 offering a trade of rooks is a blunder, and black should be winning here. Now, most players think that this is still a draw because there are 6 pawns on each side, and they just randomly push pawns, hoping for the best. However, Akiba Rubinstein, playing black in this position, realized that this pawn is weak, and he wanted to attack the pawn so that his h pawn could promote. Therefore, he played king f6, g5, and then king to h4. Now, if white just gives this pawn up, the h pawn will promote. Therefore, white's king is tied down to this h pawn. Let's see how black proceeded to win the game since the white king is now stuck. First, he advanced his pawns, then he offered a trade of pawns because he knew that white's king is inactive. So after a trade, he offered another trade of pawns with g3. And after h takes g3, white resigned. Because after pawn takes, black simply wins all of white's pawns because black's king is active. Strategy number 2: activate your pieces and look for outpost squares. The definition of an outpost square is a square that cannot be defended, that cannot be attacked or defended by your opponent's pieces, such as the d6 square in this position. Vladimir Kramnik here played knight to d6, activating his knight fully and placing it on an outpost square where it cannot be kicked out. So after king d8, what move did he play? Yes, he played rook to g1, further activating his rook. Some players would play a passive move like rook to f1, and even though white is winning here, it still gives black some activity, and you can easily mess this up. So rook g1, and then he captured the pawn, giving up his a pawn. Now, he pushed his pawn and then started activating the king. So we can see how white is activating all of his pieces, and now f5 is a great move to push the pawn forward. A check is given, but to no avail, as the king marches to f6 and the rook occupies another great outpost square on c7. Look at all of white's pieces. Only 4 of them, but all of them are in the best possible positions. This is how you should play chess. Activate all your pieces. And here, after knight to f7, black simply resigned because after king e8, white gives a check and then it's checkmate. Moving on to strategy number 3: create passed pawns. A passed pawn is defined as a pawn which cannot be defended or blocked by an opposing pawn. So, for example, this h5 pawn is not a passed pawn because a pawn is in the way and it can be captured. So, let's see how Bobby Fischer, playing white, played this position. First, he offered a trade of rook, which his opponent accepted, and now Fischer has a passed pawn on the a file. Many players might think that this is a draw, but they are mistaken. Fischer moves his pawn forward and then offered a trade of bishops. He brought his king out and then simply pushed his pawn, distracting the black king away from these pawns. And now white's king took advantage and started gobbling these pawns up. And after that, white's pawns promoted. Actually, black just resigned in this position because white is completely winning. Strategy number 4: master king and pawn endgames. Even at the 2200 level, I need to have knowledge like this, and you will too. So, in this position, many players who don't know about opposition, which is a concept, will play e4 trying to promote their pawn. But this leads to a draw. I'll tell you later why. The best move is king to e4, creating opposition and stopping the black king from moving forward, or the enemy king if you're playing as black. Let's say the king moves. Then White moves to f5, again stopping the black king. Now let's say they try to come forward. Look at this. White's king is shouldering the black king and it can't come close to the pawn. Here white pushes and then creates opposition again with black to move. Black's king moves and now king to f7 is possible, but e5 works out too. And let's just say black tries to defend the promoting square. What do you think white should play here to create opposition? Is it king g6? No, because that doesn't stop the black king from moving forward. The move is king to e6, restricting the black king. And after king f8, king to d7 is played, and the pawn can easily promote due to the presence of the white king, who was shielding the pawn from the black king. Alright, let us move on to the fifth and final strategy in the video. Activate your rooks in rook endgames. Bring them to open files. Now, in general, you should activate all of your pieces, but I'm specifically talking about rooks because 70% of games have rook endgames. So this game was played by Capablanca, who is playing as white. So what did he play here? Most players would play a move like rook to e1 just because they see a check. But after king e7, you are kind of stuck. Like, what exactly do you do, right? So the best move here actually is to play rook to h1, taking the open file. After king to f8 was played, Capablanca played rook to h7. Many amateurs would play rook to h6 as they would see this weak pawn, right? But after king to g7, the rook is attacked. So rook to h7 was played, attacking the c7 pawn. And if king g8, this pawn is gone. So black here decided to play rook to c6, attacking the c3 pawn while defending the c7 one. Now many players would get confused. They would start worrying. Oh no, this rook is about to come into my position and take the pawn. Then these pawns. Then the bishop is hanging. What do I do? I'm losing. Help me. That's the wrong approach. Capablanca here saw that he has a 2-on-1 advantage, and all these strategies are related to each other. So you'll find all of them in good endgames. Here he just pushed the pawn. If the rook takes, the pawn is gone. Therefore, black played knight c4 and Capablanca thrusted his pawn forward. After a check, a trade of minor pieces took place. Now this pawn is attacked. Again, amateurs or beginners would just think that they are losing because this pawn is going to perish. However, Capablanca simply got his king forward and he realized that this g pawn, which is a passed pawn, is really powerful. He even gave up this pawn, the f4 one. He moved his king into the opponent's position and checkmate is being threatened. The king had to move to g8. A check was delivered and then white started gobbling up black's pawns. And we see that white's rook is really active, and look at black's rook. It's just so passive. It's desperately trying to defend checkmate attacks. Look at white's rook dominate. So a few moves later, it captures the other pawn and the pawns simply promote. Capablanca won this game in a few moves. If you follow these 5 strategies mentioned in the video, you will play better in the next endgame you play. Thanks for watching. Train to win. Bye.